Dad's parents were poor immigrants from Italy, and they came from Casavallina, which is, I think, on the Barry Ocean, not too far from Naples. They came here, and my father-in-law would work 2 and 3 jobs to support his family. Daddy was the granddad, your grandfather, was the second child. Mackie was first, then Dad, then Adeline, and then Lola. So he was the only boy with 3 girls.
You know, I remember him telling me that he remembered taking baths that were drawn from hot water boiled on the stove, and I remember thinking like, wow, I remember thinking, boy, you must be old, like that you didn't have running hot water. And you know, to think that he was a Depression baby, an immigrant baby, you know, how that, and think about how my life was so much different from that, and how much different my kids' lives are. It's amazing to think about from generation to generation.
Dad told me that they were poor when they were young, but he was very artistic, kind of like Uncle Richie and Uncle Jimmy, not so much me. He would make a toy or cardboard baseball diamond, and he would get Topps baseball cards of all the baseball players, and he invented a game. And his art of the baseball diamond and his creativity of the game was so good that all the neighborhood children would want to play this game with him. Now I know that's true because the toys that your grandfather made us, me, Uncle Jimmy, and Uncle Richie, were better than the toys that we would buy in the toy store.
He always had a job, and as a little boy, he had a paper route. Then as he got older, he worked at Stern's department store, which was in Center City, Philadelphia. And he loved earning money, so he quit college. And his father had a fit and told him, you go back to college. And he did. And I said to him, why'd you go back? And he said, because I was afraid of my father. After college, he went into the Marine Corps, which he loved. I think the proudest thing in his past was the fact that he was a Marine. But thank God he never saw action, because I can't imagine how it would have changed him if he ever killed anybody.
Did he ever tell you where he got his elbow wound?
Oh, he lied.
He got shot.
Yeah, he used to say he got shot with the elbow wound, but it really was, I think it was a sporting accident, he fell.
On the street, my heart skips a beat. I say to myself, hello, Linda.
I was 24, and I was getting antsy because I wasn't married, so I made a novena. Novena is a prayer you say for 9 days. It's a repetitious prayer you say for 9 days. And my Aunt Edith and my Uncle Joe knew my husband as an attorney, but he was their paper boy. So my Uncle John invited my husband Jim, your grandfather, to come to a banquet, and they sat him next to me. And we met. 6 weeks later we got engaged. 6 months later we got married. Well, Uncle Larry calls that your grandfather the fruit of the novena. Actually, we met in early December, so this was around closer to Christmas. And the show was about a child who had to give his siblings away, and he had to find good homes for them. And my husband got all choked up, and we were both crying over it. And I knew then that I was going to marry him. He loved children, and I knew he would be a fabulous father, and he was a fabulous father. When my son Richard was a baby, he was in the hospital. He was about 3 months old, and he had to have a hernia operation. And there were other children in the ward, and he just went from child to child entertaining them. I think my husband loved my mother so much. It's one of the reasons he loved me, but what he didn't realize is I took after my father. And he and my mother had a wonderful, wonderful relationship.
What was Dad's relationship with his parents?
Very poor.
Was Dad a good son?
He was a very good son in that he had a sense of responsibility to them. When his mother was very sick, and she had fallen and she fractured her skull, and they did surgery on her, and she had a massive stroke, and they cut off her leg, and she was in bed for 8 months, and your father went every day to see his mother.
And was he close to his siblings?
No, he loved them. We very seldom saw them, and we had very, very seldom did we socialize with them, except when they lived 2 blocks away from us. And when I did Christmas, I did Easter, I did Thanksgiving, I did Mother's Day, I did their birthdays, and they would come to those dinners that I had with the families. He went into when he graduated from law school, he worked in the district attorney's office with a female who was Lisa Richette, who later became a judge, and she hired him, and he was an assistant DA for a while doing criminal law.
I stood with Jim from before the time I entered the bar to the time I went on the bench, which was just shy of 25 years, without a break. There was never a contract with us. There was never a contract on any cases, fee sharing. There was never a partnership agreement. There was nothing, just word of mouth and trust. Jim never turned anyone away because they didn't have money. He may have turned them away because they didn't want to part with their money, but any worthy cause he would represent. I saw innumerable clients who came into the office and were there for years with Jim championing a cause that he felt was just. And Jim's aperture for what is just didn't depend upon whether it was a case that would be easy to win. It was whether a case should be litigated.
He was not a mercenary. He was actually not a very good businessman because he did not always collect from his clients. It was hard for him to turn down a case. He was very altruistic. He did a lot of representations, I'd say, for the community, for people who needed help. He would not necessarily charge sometimes. I remember that.
His moral code was help people who have less and don't step on other people to get what you want.
This was part of what your father believed, and he believed this in action. A lot of people have beliefs, but they don't live their beliefs.
Aware of the situation that the black population lived in, so he went out of his way and he would represent any poor black family free. He would do pro bono. And he once said to me, if I don't represent them, who will? Anyway, he was so loved in the community, especially the black community, that he received an award from the NAACP for his service to the neighborhood.
Jim did not have a selfish bone in his body. Jim amassed enough money to take care of his family and to take care of his lifestyle, which involved a lot of press to flesh, happy hour, interpersonal kind of mixing of ideas and stories, which he loved. But basically, he had no greed. He would never do anything that was dishonest.
His honesty was the main thing. You always get the same thing. Your dad was great. I loved your dad.
There's an exceptional quality that he had, was that he was good. He didn't want to, he was just a good person. He had a good heart. That would be the biggest thing that would stand out for me. I wish I had $1 for every time a judge, an attorney, a client, a friend said, boy, I love your father. You just get used to it. It's like, yeah, I get it. Like, everybody, oh, you're Jim DeMarco's son? God, I loved your father. However he was, however he wanted to be, he would never do it at the expense of someone else. Would not look to step over somebody. He would not look to belittle someone. He would not look to rub anyone the wrong way. Or, like being an attorney, the way he practiced, it was always mindful of other people.
Got you deep in the heart of me, so deep in my heart, you're really a part of me.
He loved to sing, and he was well known for his Christmas parties. in which he had 70 or 80 of his closest friends come, and I think the whole thing was a ploy so he could have an audience, he could sing. And he would hire the Carmen D orchestra, but he only had around 3 or 4 pieces, the piano, and I don't even remember everything else they had.
They always mentioned the Christmas party that he had at the Greek church. I remember your dad's party. Yeah. He would hire a band, and it would be well attended with judges. He would sing. Sometimes we would sing. But always a lot of judges, a lot of lawyers. It was always a nice party. Everybody talked about it. They all loved it. They all remember it.
I am thrilled to have this beautiful daughter in the family, waiting for a long time. And it's very difficult to describe how happy I really am. What makes me happy was when she called me.
Kind of hands off, very hands off in the way that he fathered, but very loving, wanted nothing but the best for his kids.
He adored them. He would play with them. He would get on the floor and be a horse, and they'd climb all over him, or they'd get under him and push his stomach up because he had a big belly. He used to call it beer belly. He was a fabulous father because he adored his children.
He was pretty closed off. I mean, he did not discipline us. Mom would want him to discipline, and he wouldn't.
However, he never disciplined them. One time, I complained to him about a situation in the family, and he had a very mild talk about them to the child, and my mother said to him, "Gee, Jim, did you see that dirty face you gave him?" As they left the room with their back turned to him. He could not discipline his children. That was totally my domain. But that's the highest form of discipline because he disciplined with love, and they didn't want to disappoint him.
My Aunt Lola, his sister, his youngest sister, told me a story about his relationship with his father, my grandfather. He was sent to bed without any supper, and that was considered a harsh punishment by his mother, my grandmother, and again, his sister, Lola. So Aunt Lola would sneak up to give him some food, and he would say, "No, this is my punishment. My father wants me to have it. I don't want any of it." And that was the respect that he had for his father.
Daddy led by example. He was a good guy. I mean, he was a good person and a warm person. He was really fun when we were very young, but as we got older, he was not that type of a father, which we would communicate and ask how your day was. That wasn't his style. He never criticized. He loved his sons, so you knew he loved you, but I don't think he ever actually said it. He wasn't the type to do that.
He led by example. Okay, so I never, ever heard him say something bad about our mom. Your children are watching you at all times, and I think he did a very good job. He loved mom, and that she was good, and that was part of the house. It was a pleasant, positive vibe because of him. He did not, there was nothing negative about what he brought to the house, how he affected our image of our mom, 100%. But I think the only bit of advice he ever gave me was go to church. That's the only thing he ever told me to do. That was it.
He went to church every Sunday. He was a lector at the masses. He would sing in the choir. He was a good, decent man, and he led by example.
He didn't really teach people. He didn't explain things. He was not communicative like that. But there was one incident I remembered. We were in a McDonald's. I was 7, 8, 9, I guess. I was very young, and there was a boy, a little bit older than me, who was, I don't know if he was alone or an orphan or something. Something was going on with this kid, and I was eating fries, and the boy walked by, and he didn't look right, and he reached for my fries, and Dad, who had very quick reflexes, by the way, grabbed his hand before he got to my fries. I was afraid, and he grabbed the kid's hand, and Dad, without any upset, any anger, said, "Are you hungry? Do you want some fries?" And the boy didn't say a word. He said, I'll get you some fries. Do you want some fries? I, of course, moved away. I took my meal and I moved away because I was intimidated. But Dad was so calm, and I just remember how, and, you learn not to get upset. That definitely sat with me, and I remember it now to that day. Also because I was afraid, but also because how calm and how, he cared. He cared about the kid, but I never forgot that. Never forgot that.
He would never say anything negative, ever. No matter what. I remember in college, I think it was Rich specifically, he was like, he's like, "Boy, how you holding up?" or something like that. And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Boy, Dad is furious." Everybody was talking about how furious Dad was, and he never said a word to me, ever. To this, ever my whole life. He never brought it up, ever. Apparently he ranted and raved about how, mad he was. I don't know, because I have no idea. He never said a word to me, ever.
Many important people, situations, and writings have crossed my life. However, one person sticks out the most in my mind. My Uncle Jim has been of great significance to my life. On Thanksgiving and Christmas, I have fond memories of how he would invite the police officers and city workers who had been hired to work at the Thanksgiving parade to have a plate at my aunt's home-cooked Thanksgiving dinner. Another fond memory of my uncle is from one of our fishing trips, a time-honored tradition of ours. After driving his boat 45 minutes out of the port, we came across a boat stuck on an island. My uncle cut our fishing trip short, much to my dismay, to take them back to their home. At the time, I remember being sad and angry, but in hindsight, he taught me a valuable lesson that it is important to always treat others with kindness.
And, it's funny when you spend your childhood with people that you really care about, and he's been dead 19 years. I still think about him a lot. I always felt at home in his house, and I miss him to this day.
Your grandfather wouldn't just volunteer advice, but he did give great advice when you'd ask him. And any time I had a moral dilemma or what I thought was a moral dilemma, I remember him saying, "You do the right thing." It's such a small thing just to inconvenience yourself when you could do a good thing for another person. Always do the good thing when in doubt.
So I use Jim as a mentor. Because Jim was a man of the world, and he knew, he gave good advice. People love to get advice from Jim. So I said, "Jim, I need your advice." He said, "Well, go ahead, Matt, I'd be glad." I said, "I'm getting married." I says, "My wife has decided that she wants to go on a honeymoon, and she wants to go to Virgin Islands. And I want to go somewhere else, but I can't." He says, "Well, the woman always chooses where the honeymoon is." All right. I said, "Well, the other thing, Jim, is she's picked out a catering spot. And I don't want to go to this place." "Matt, the woman always chooses where the banquet's going to be." I said, "Well, Jim, she also wants to move down the street over here in this apartment." "She always chooses the first marital home." I says, "Jim, what do I get to choose?" And he looked at me with that look, with that twinkle in his eye, when he knows that he has just backed you in a corner. He says, "How stupid are you? You're getting married. You don't ever get to choose anymore."
Although your grandfather told Judge Carafiello that the woman makes all the decisions, he really didn't live that out so much, maybe mostly, but not on some very important things. We have these wonderful fine memories because they were so good as a team, and because of sacrifices that Nana made, that Grandpop insisted. Now, Grandma wasn't always happy with the demands of your grandfather, but because she stood by him, we're all able to have all these fond memories of a loving family. And that's because of sacrifices that your grandma made.
Very jovial, he was.
His sense of humor was very weak.
He would tell corny jokes. He was very corny. He had the corniest sense of humor. It wasn't that funny. He only made us laugh because he thought he was so funny. So we would laugh because he was just a happy-go-lucky person, and he would tell corny jokes. He would laugh at himself, and it was, very endearing.
He made me laugh all the time. Even though he was an attorney, he was the most easygoing man you ever saw. And I never felt more at home at his house there when he was around. He'd tell jokes that made you laugh, the same silly joke the whole time there,
He would repeat the same one over and over.
Over and over again.
So it was hysterical. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, it would start, he would always had to watch whatever he wanted, but I would come in and we would be together. And, I would be sitting there and have my back to him because he had the couch at the back. And then, there'd be a root beer barrel. The little wrapper would come flying over and quiet. And then I'd go, oh. I would look over and he'd give his silly face. So he would pretend like he didn't do it. I would turn around and he'd pretend to not notice, but noticing, right? Depending on the mood, then maybe another one would come by or whatever. And then, I would retaliate, and he would laugh and
Here's how goofy your grandfather could be. We would sit in front of him while watching TV, and he would reach over, tap us on the back like that. So, turn around because, what do you want? And he would stare at the TV like he knew nothing about what he just did. He'd go. So he was trying to stop himself from laughing, but it was so obvious what happened. They say, Dad, what? And he'd say, what? What do you mean, what? And it would go back and forth to complete ridiculousness. So the next time he'd tap me, he'd tap, and I would go running like I was chasing someone. He would not be able to stop laughing. Then I'd come up and say, hey, Dad, why are you laughing? And he would just completely make something up. And we would have little variations of this game. We probably did that for about 10 years. I'm sorry. We did it about 10 years every week. And he never got bored of it, and it never got old.
Mom remembers.
Yeah, no, I know.
You guys having water.
Right, no, I know, I remember. He would say, don't you do it. And I'll go, right, I remember her telling the story. He would laugh, he loved it, and so the fact that he would egg it on, so it was hard to get much out of him, whether it was advice or whatever. And, I think maybe we could get something out of him that way. He didn't connect to many people. He didn't really connect to anybody, but he connected in his own way. And I think that was such a pleasant time, those goofy fights that we would have, because it was a connection. And that, that's why it was fun.
Who is the Phantom?
Right. Oh, the Phantom. Honestly, I'll look right at the camera for this. I honestly don't remember.
The Phantom was born on the trip when they dropped me off from college.
The Phantom. Something just as simple as breaking wind in a car, and it smelled. You might tease the person that you think who took responsibility for it, but otherwise, you let it go. It's maybe something you get a minute of a chuckle or a minute of teasing, tops. Not your grandfather.
Dad would always say, Jimmy's the Phantom. It's Jimmy. Jimmy was the Phantom. And Jimmy would do the opposite, but they were cute with that. Yeah, that went on for a while.
Does it matter?
It really doesn't matter. He got so much humor and joy out of that silly story.
The story of who broke wind. Your grandfather kept that alive from the time it happened in college for another good 10 to 15 years. And we laughed about that no less than several times a month, hysterically. Our stomachs hurt.
And it was, I guess, the way back. I don't even remember Jimmy coming, but I guess Jimmy did come with us. And they, of course, blamed it on each other, who ripped the fart. It was obviously one inside a car that needed to roll down the windows. And they kept blaming each other for it. And no, they talked about it forever, until he died. It was, who...
Like, he just ran with it and wouldn't put it down. I mean, we had if you added up all the little minutes of laughs, we had hours and hours and hours of enjoyment about that story. And,
the teasing that your grandfather did in accusing Jimmy. And of course then Jimmy said, whatever it is, he just played off Grandpop. Nothing more. And we had hours and hours of laughter because of how silly your grandfather was, which taught me a lesson. It's good, it's fun to be around someone who is always laughing, who is always in a good mood. Happiness is contagious. And of course, so is misery. Misery is contagious. So one thing that was so special about your grandfather is that he saw humor in the simplest things. He would just share the happiness he got from being around us. It taught me to see joy in my family and in simple things.
One of the nicest things about him was Christmas. He loved Christmas. He never put any limits on what I spent for Christmas. We had a pretty big house and a large living room, and we would put up a very tall tree. He built a platform, he put a train set on it, and he put a village, and the village had snow, it had lights in the houses, it had carriages and skaters on mirrors, and it was and the first time he did it, I was amazed. I had no idea what he was going to do, and it was really beautiful. It was a wonderful thing.
I do remember Christmases. They were heaven on earth. The excitement that both parents created for us was so special that the entire season glowed. The toys that we would walk down and look and play with, it was impossible to go to sleep the night before, and when we woke up, we would just sit and look at the clock until Grandmom, Nana, and Grandpop would let us open the toys. And when we would walk down, it was almost a dizzying out-of-body experience to open those presents and enjoy the day.
One of the nice things about the shore is my husband loved to fish. And his boyfriends, Frank, Andy, and Don, would come maybe once or twice a month. And of course, when he was sick and dying, they came every week. And they would go fishing. And when they didn't come, he would make the boys go with him. Of course, they were little. And Richard, and then Larry, and then Richard and Larry. And then Richard and Larry didn't want to do it anymore, and then Jimmy had to go. And then Jimmy and Jamie Kelly would go fishing with Jim.
I know he drove just about everyone crazy. Everyone, all these people that he did great things for. Everybody would be like, oh.
He could be exasperating. You'd want to pull out your last hair. Well, this happened one day in front of Judge Calvin Wilson, who was the secretary of the Board of Judges, and I showed up and I'd asked Jimmy to cover for me. One time I asked him to cover for me. And I go, the judge says, where have you been? I said, actually, Your Honor, I was in family court. I put in a busy slip. I did this. I'm Mr. DeMarco. He wasn't here. I'm going to hold you in contempt. I don't know whether to fine you or to put you in jail. And he is reaming me and he is castigating me. And in back, I see a curtain move. There was Jimmy DeMarco hiding behind a curtain laughing because him and Judge Wilson had planned this little thing just to torture me.
I love Matt Carafiello's story.
Grandfather wasn't perfect, and he was maddening to work for. Grandpop gave me very little help sometimes and actually made things harder. He didn't mean to. It was his disorganization. It was his way of dumping everything on me without any authority to get things done. And I remember running out of the office so angry with him that he promised to do something that he didn't do, and this was one of many times, so it was almost like working against him.
All the girls who love before, who travel in and out our door, I'm glad they came along. We dedicate this song to all the girls we love.
There is no doubt he was going to make that wedding. And, you know, he said goodbye to the world that night.
In the Italian wedding, and it was also traditional to remember our mothers, our fathers who predeceased us, our sisters, and so on and so on. So I'd like to do a song for them. Tell me that you love me tonight. My father's favorite song. Okay. Tell me that you love me tonight.
Father Paul, who was the pastor at our church, we went to St. Thomas Aquinas Church in South Philadelphia, and Father Paul came and heard his final confession. And he said to me, "Your husband was a saint. He was just a very good, honest, honorable man."
Yeah, the whole church was packed. Mom recently said she was looking at the book, there were 500 people. You know, it was a mayor's funeral. And, you know, that definitely, you know, I also remember people I never met before standing in line. You know, these people are just coming and coming and coming. And people I never met crying. I remember a couple people I had never seen before that were crying. So, you know, and they said, "Boy, I loved your father." And some people would have stories. He did this for me. He did that for me. You know, he wouldn't get paid. He would just do things to help people. And that was a rare thing. And you could see it in his funeral from all the people who showed up to just give. They just wanted to be a part of it. You know, maybe they just wanted to be a part of it.
There were 500 people were at his funeral. And he had such a large number of cars that we had a police escort. Of course, we had a Marine Corps honorary guard, which he would have adored. And police cars would keep going ahead, blocking traffic. So I don't know, maybe there were 60 cars going to his funeral. And that was an honor. I think the boys said that there were 30 judges at that funeral.
He would have loved to have met his grandkids. It would have been great for his grandkids to have known him. He would have been a blast, but he is not here because of smoking, obesity, lack of exercise, and drinking. Drinking definitely, right. You know, and if you keep doing bad things, it will catch up with you. So, you know, you got to take care of yourself. My father is an example to you. There will be something that you don't get to do because of if you don't take care of yourself.
I think he would tell them that they should live with honor. Jim enjoyed being respected by everyone. He enjoyed not ever being accused of taking the low road. Live with honor. Live with compassion in your heart for everyone. the lowest to the highest, because we are here truly to serve those that are not as fortunate as we are. And live with love in your heart for everyone. That was the way Jim lived his life.
Remember this video. Remember your grandfather. You've got a guardian angel. His lesson to you, when you live for others, you'll never be alone.
Gosh, he was so well respected. He was such a gentleman, and he had such integrity. He was very honest, and he was very simple, and people loved him for it.
I wish I had $1 for every time a judge, an attorney, a client, a friend said, "Boy, I love your father."
Jim had the ability to form deep and abiding and loving friendships with all people. It didn't matter what their race was. It doesn't matter their economic status, whether they lived in a tenement or if they lived in a mansion. Jim amassed friends that were just amazing. I mean, they were all gems because they were all different.
Because, again, I think it all went into the circular thing I'm talking about knowing oneself, wanting to do good, and you know, no one could pull him out of who he was.
Grandfather was a very wonderful, happy, funny. He had a great sense of humor.
He would strive to help people, because that was the duty of his life. He became a lawyer to help people, to reach people, but only within the precepts of sound, legal, ethical principles. He wasn't a liar, he wasn't a sneak, he wasn't a stooge. He was just pure, unadulterated goodness.
The last and most important lesson he taught me was about loss. After his death, I was quite distraught. I knew how much I would miss his fishing trips and our time together. Towards the end, however, he would tell me to always remember what he had taught me. I always nodded my head in agreement without thinking, but now I realize how much he had taught me. Most importantly, he has taught me that the impressions that a person leaves behind him, what he has taught others, will always be the footprints that he leaves behind him. I always know that I have his footprints to follow in my life, and I always know what kind of a person I want to be.
Took the blues and did it more.